Welcome to your Joyful Riches podcast, where you gain precious tips and tools for creating your beautiful, joyful, thriving life for yourself and your loved ones, because we all deserve to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. This podcast is delivered with the International Childhood Cancer Charity and G100 Global Networking, and powered by Encore FM, this super awesome free podcast made easy platform. And for today, we're so honored and thrilled to have Amanda with us. Amanda, thank you for joining us. Would you care to share what is it that you do?
Hi, my name is Amanda Cottrell, and I am a teacher, an author, and a speaker. And I love to help empower people to find their own unique creative gifts within themselves. So I love that you at the start just talked about creativity and its importance, because that's my passion.
Oh, that is so amazing. A teacher, an author, and a speaker. So what does a What
Sorry.
what what sort of book do you do? What sort of book do you write? I think there are some children book that you wrote.
Yeah, I've written a number of children's books, mostly focused on yoga and mindfulness and empathy. I also written a book on divorce for kids to help them understand that when they're going through a struggle, sometimes things can, in the end, be better than sometimes two homes can be better than one. I've also written a number of workbooks on mindfulness and connecting to yourself and reducing your stress, and also a collaborative book with 9 other women on how yoga empowered my life.
Wow, you are amazing. That is I know when I skim through all the different book that you have like more than a dozen book that I've written like three. Number four on the way, and I'm like, how does he do that? How does he do that? Does he ever sleep? Do you ever sleep? And so because I know that you're working, you're a speaker, you do this, and also you have a child. Like, this
Mhm.
lady ever sleep? It must be superhuman. But tell us about the with the in respect that with the children book and with the International Childhood Cancer Charity. Tell us more a little bit about the children book. You talk about empathy and when children going through tough time. I remember seeing a book where it shows that you about it has a bunch of like different emoji or those emotion expressions on it. Do you think children ex, uh, process their feelings the same way with adult? Do they understand empathy?
Well, that's something that I think needs to be taught, right? Is because kids don't necessarily, some kids are born definitely with that like empathetic gift of understanding how others feel and being able to put themselves in their shoes. But also it's important to teach like boundaries within our empathy as well, so that we're making sure that we're taking care of our energy first. And so my book, I Am Empathetic, it really teaches kids about empathy, and then also how to just like navigate it, how to show people that they care, but by also making sure that you take care of yourself too, but when not are always giving that you're filling your cup as well.
Oh, I love that. I love how many times we think about, yes, you want to teach your kid to be empathetic,
Mhm.
and that is very important. And at the same time, we honestly, I personally, and kind of like everybody also out there, it's kind of like you got to be more empathetic, you got to be more empathetic, you got to be more empathetic, and important to have boundaries, because you can, if you some people are so empathetic and they let people run all over them, and everything start with from being a kid, right? And how you being brought up, then why that is so super awesome. So is there, say, one example, one tool in particular that you can say, okay, this is how one can teach their children to be empathetic, and still have boundary? Like, is there an example?
Well, I think that one of the things that we can do is check in with ourselves first, right? We want to be like, okay, is this affecting me negatively? And if it is, then can I take a step back, but still have like compassion and empathy for the other person, regardless of what they're going through. And so empathy sometimes is just like understanding, like, hey, maybe that kid is having a bad day today and we don't understand why, but knowing that it's because of something that's going on at home or something. So one of the things I teach in my classroom is like, some days kids come in grumpy to school and they might like bump you as you're like taking your boots off and storm into the classroom. And if you come and say like, hey, Miss Cottrell, like this kid just shoved me in the hallway, and then I look at their faces and I'm like, they're just like mad because something happened clearly at home like that. And I'm like, okay, like let's look at their faces right now. Like, do you think that maybe you're like they shouldn't have bumped you, right? They should have said sorry, but like just look at them right now. Do you think what they did to you is affecting them, or is it something else that happened maybe at home that's already like they already just came in and they probably didn't even notice that they bumped you, right?
Yeah.
And so like let's just take a step back and look at this, and then we can say like, yeah, in a minute when they calm down and are feeling better, we'll go and we'll talk to them about them like bumping you while you put your boots on or took your boots off or whatever. But for the next like hour or half an hour or whatever, we're just going to let them calm down and figure out what it is that they're going through, and then we'll deal, because you're clearly like you just got bumped. That's not like they're not visually upset by it, but we'll deal with that in a few minutes once we figure out what the other thing is that is going on with that other child. And then they'd be like, oh yeah, like maybe, and then they start to understand too, like there'll be days where certain kids come in just like completely upset, and that's because they got into a fight with their brother on the way to school, and they're just like come in like so frustrated and agitated. And then I'm like, well, you can't do math right now. Like you're just so angry. Like, why don't you go for a walk and take a drink and maybe like read a book for a few minutes, and then when you're feeling ready, we'll try these math problems. And sometimes adults forget that there's things going on in kids' lives too that we need to take a step back from and be more empathetic towards, because
I love that. I want to say, I would apology to interject, but I love how you show this kid like, look how disturbed they are already. Yes, they bump you, which is not ideal. And it wasn't like they come and beat you up on the spot or something, right? Which is a little bit different, but they bump you while you're putting on your boots. And now they look at them how they are agitated, or they can't do math because they look at them, they are now agitated. And that you teach them to, yes, we're going to address it, but we're not going to be doing that right now.
Mhm.
And that I feel is just so important, even for adult. If you work in a workplace, depend on the workplace, and sometimes in companies where they kind of like want to talk to you and want to get to just like that's like, can you see that that person is going on through something, and probably whatever you say, it's not going, never mind going from one ear through the next, it's just bounce right back in the incorrect way, in a way that you don't want. So I love how you teach the children that yes, you want to be empathetic, and then also how to be smart in approaching others, I would say, is what you're teaching. Do you feel that children process emotions differently than adults then?
Well, kids sometimes don't have like control over their emotions the way that adults sometimes have learned to, right? And so like you'll see the 2-year-old have a temper tantrum in the middle of the store because they haven't learned that skill to like like maybe not have the temper tantrum just because they didn't get their own way in that exact moment. But adults will like deal with it differently and maybe in a more like appropriate way in the moment, but not later on, right? So if you just push down your emotions, you still haven't truly dealt with them. And so kids, lots of the times, they are really good at showing their emotions. And what I found with children too is that if you start talking to them about their feelings, they actually have a lot of really complex understanding of their feelings after the fact, not necessarily in that exact moment. So I've had conversations with them. One of my very first book that I ever wrote was called It's Okay to Feel. And in it are very, very different drawings about different feelings and the emotions that they have. And I had this conversation with my class one day about the jealousy feeling. And they said, well, sometimes I can feel happy and jealous at the same time. And I was like, can you explain that to me? And they were saying how like they go to birthday parties and they're super excited for their friend getting all their like gifts, but then at the same time they're like a little bit jealous of the gifts that they're getting, and how those mixed feelings are confusing. And I was like, this is like grade 3 students, so even like at that young they can explain their like conflicting emotions, where one, they're almost like can have those two emotions at the exact same time. And do they know that in the moment of the birthday party? Maybe not. But after having that conversation later on, and then all of the kids were like, yeah, I feel that too. And like, as soon as you start talking about those emotions, then they're able to connect the dots as well. And I think sometimes maybe as adults, we forget to do that because we like get triggered by something and we react in a way that's probably based on your childhood traumas. And if you take a step back and you look at it, you're like, oh, that's why I was triggered. But unless you like take that time to reflect later on, you won't recognize it. And the beautiful thing about school and about teaching kids is that we have more time sometimes to explore those emotions and feelings and have reflections. Whereas as an adult, when you're rushing from here to here to here and getting all of your jobs done and being busy all the time, we forget to sit back and reflect. And that's the real beauty of like journaling and self-reflection and yoga and mindfulness, is that you start to do those things. You start to recognize your triggers and recognize where they come from in your childhood and those lacks that were happening in childhood.
I love that. I love and you are very correct many times. And I love how you say don't stuff away your emotions. As a grief specialist, I see a lot of people where they just kind of like stuffing away their emotions, and then they keep running or hiding from it, one whichever way that they go. And sometimes it is because they're busy, but sometimes also because people get uncomfortable with their emotion, and therefore they kind of like, it's kind of like almost the concept, people, somebody crying and people say, oh, don't worry, you don't need to cry, or oh, I'm gonna leave you alone, or something like that. And partly because they don't know what to do. The Grief Institute did many studies, evidence-based studies in multiple locations, and they shows that one of the most common reasons people's like is somebody crying and they're like, I'm gonna leave you alone, or I'm gonna walk away, or sometimes even tell their kid, oh, why are you crying? Stop crying. Oh, go into your room or something like that. Is because they don't know what to do with the situations and they don't feel comfortable. So anybody that ever have anyone and you feeling bad and you feeling sad and you cry and people's like, oh, you don't need to cry, or okay, I'll leave you alone, or I'm gonna walk away. It's not anything about you. It's about them. Like we many times said, it's about them. They're not comfortable with seeing you cry. They don't know what to do with you. But I love that. So with many adults who are not comfortable sometimes with their own feelings, never mind anybody else's. Like and maybe they've been running very very much and being so busy and so forth. Are there a couple tips that you can share on how an adult can help children with their emotions, particularly children who are having a tough time, whether it's the children's that say having a tough time at school, or with the International Childhood Cancer Charity, children who are physically ill and might even know that sometimes some of them old enough knowing that they are dying. Is there some tips and tools you can have for that?
One of the things that like I use in my classroom is when a kid's crying, I don't just leave them. I'll be like, what is it that you need right now? Do you need to go for a walk? Do you want to go to the bathroom and just like take a moment? Do you want us to leave you alone? Do you want to go for a walk with a friend? Like, what is it that you need right now? Because every kid needs something different when they're upset. And usually they're able to tell you, or sometimes they're like, I don't know. And in that case, then I'll be like, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes and come back and check on you. But there definitely is, and even as adults, we can ask ourselves when we're upset, what is it that I need right now? Do I need a hug? And sometimes people just need a hug, or maybe they just need 5 minutes to themselves, or maybe they need to go for a really quick brisk walk because they're angry, and after they've started moving their body, they're able to process that. And I find even for myself, when I'm upset, I need to like go and do something physical so that I can come back and calm down. So generally like a walk or a run or going to yoga will help me regulate myself. And I think that's something that is really important to teach kids too, is that when we get stuck in that like mind spin, sometimes the best way to get out of it is by doing something physical, and eventually our mind will go off it and we'll feel calmer and we're able to process it better.
I love that. I love how I'm taking plenty notes. It's so beautiful, wonderful, all the things that you're sharing. Like I got to take notes here. I love how you share that. That is just so awesome, because it's sometimes with adult, particularly the part where you say it's, sometimes children just say it's I don't know, and that sometimes I have seen. I personally don't have children actually, but I've seen many people where they're like, oh, "What do you need?" And then the kid says, "I don't know," and then they that upset them, right? I mean, if the kid can say, the child can say, "Oh, I need this, I need that," there are plenty of adults then that says, "Oh, no, you don't need this anyway." If the kid says, "I need this and I need that," and then they said, "You don't need it." But even more, I just from friends and even in stores and things like that, when you observe people a lot of time adults say, "What do you mean you don't know? Then just, stop crying," or something like that, instead of, "Okay, let's explore more," or give you a little time. How do you know, for adult, how do you know if particularly if they say I don't know, how do you know that they are not just throwing a tantrum, or would in other words, they just say crying for attentions and this and that? Would kids do something like that?
Yeah, well, what is it that's missing then if they are using that as a tool for attention? So what other gaps are there in their attachment styles or in their attachment to their primary caregivers that are causing that? So those attention-seeking behaviors are usually tied back to an attachment and something that's going on at home or within their family or in their friend group that's causing those lash outs or those attention-seeking behaviors. And you can usually tie it back to something that's happened to them at a different point in their life. And when we look, sometimes I wonder about certain kids, and then once I meet their parents, I'm like, oh, that's why. It's like so obvious afterwards. And so I think sometimes we really need to look at, okay, they're doing these attention-seeking behaviors. Why? So what is it that in their attachment styles that are causing that? And then what is it that they're missing, that they're needing? And each kid needs different things too. So one kid might need lots of hugs and one kid might not, and one kid might need lots of praise. And so that's why like the 5 love languages of children is like really important to read as well, because it gives you some ideas as to like what your child's love language might be. And then and also you should read the 5 love languages for yourself as well for adults, because then you'll recognize, okay, when I need these things to feel loved, and that might be different than what my child needs to feel loved. And so you might be doing the things that you need to feel loved and thinking, why isn't my child getting this? Or why isn't that kid getting that? But then you realize, oh, their love languages are different than yours. And so you have to tweak the way you're approaching them in order to fit their love languages.
I love that. And it's so funny that you mentioned that the one of our most recent guests is a doctor and a coach, come from Asian family, and she was saying about that, and growing up in an Asian family, we were all laughing about how one of the most common Asian love language is not hug and expressions of love. It's here, let me give you food and as much physical thing as possible. But as a child, many times we're like, I just want to be hugged.
Yeah.
Want to be hugged. I just don't want to be, or you know, I just don't want to be told where is the plus on the A. Well, as kids, we didn't understand that's the way they express their care, right? And so, but that is so important. If you have not read for our audience, as Dr. Amanda shared in here, the 5 love languages and the 5 love languages of children, and you have children, working with children's, it's a good one to explore. That is definitely. I promise this is the last questions. Does children, you talk about the triggers, and in adult, and I know in adult, in many times trigger have, as you imply, something that was unresolved from their childhood, sort of like in the term of grief specialist, incompletely resolved grief or experience that traumatized them. Do you find children experience triggered as well? And if so, is it different than adult?
Well, we all experience triggers based on our upbringing, right? And so what triggers one child is going to be different than another child, same with an adult. So like, for example, if a friend cancels on you and you have attachment issues around feeling like loved, then that friend canceling on you might cause a trigger of different things that would make you feel unloved or unvalued. And whereas somebody else, they'd be like, oh, whatever, like no big deal. They canceled, we'll reschedule another day. But even in that day, it just might be that day that you're triggered by that cancellation because you needed it in that moment. And so kids are the same way in that, is that something might trigger them one day and not the next. And it could be based on how much sleep they got. It could be based on if they ate that morning. It could be based on so many things. Their hormonal changes. I teach grade 5, so the hormonal changes are a lot. And so there's things that like on a normal day wouldn't bother certain kids, and then my cat. And then on just a day that their hormones are all over the place, they'll be triggered by that. And so I think especially when you're working with kids in the puberty age, that you really have to be aware of sometimes they're going to be triggered by things just because they're hormonal that day. And it happens for boys and girls too, not just girls, as we sometimes assume. And so it's sometimes there's a lot going on with kids as they go through their stages, and just to take a step back and be gentle with them in and recognizing that we might not understand their triggers, and we can always just ask them about it later, or they can reflect on it too.
Sounds like communication and patience is something that's a recipe when we're working, interacting with children, whether it's our own children's or other children. And what how do people find these books, understanding children emotions? I will is there a place where they can find all your wonderful books?
Yeah, they can go on Amazon and just search my name, Amanda Cottrell, or you can go to my website, www.artmindfulnessandcreativity.com, and most of them are on there. There's some new ones I haven't put on my website yet. I need to still get to it, but hopefully they'll be on there soon. I need to update my website, but yeah, so on my website or just search on Amazon.
Super. We'll share your website. Excuse, and we might be able to share the Amazon link as well. So definitely, and as for our audience, as Amanda mentioned earlier, she's a teacher, a coach, and an author. So connect with Amanda, so you will be able to consult her more on all these things that if you have any concerns, whether about your children or yourself, she'll be able to guide you. And as we close our conversations together today, do you have a final word for our audience and the children? Perhaps children who are facing a tough time, for children who are grieving of their own illness or some other situations that they are in a tough time. Do you have a final message for the children and the adult?
Yeah, I really want to always connect everything back to our own unique creative gifts. And so if you are struggling with something, is there something that you really love to do where you get to be creative that you could do a little bit more of? And that will help you connect to your dharma and connect to yourself. And it actually will help uplift you and make you feel better, because our creativity has so much power to just uplift our lives. And so really, how much time do you spend being creative and just enjoying whatever it is that your creative gifts are? Because we all have different ones, and they could be on the computer, or they could be drawing, or they could be painting, or they could be woodworking. We all have different creative gifts, and if you can spend a little bit more time in that zone, and I bet you it will completely shift your mood.
I love that. I love that. That's very true. Being a grief specialist, I actually have that as one of the main one of the tools for adult. I don't work with children, but I love how you hold your advice. So perhaps when our children, the International Childhood Cancer Charity children, need some help in their emotions and navigating things, hopefully we'll be able to connect with you. But I love that. So creativity it is surely one sure way. And sometimes people think they got to be creating a statue or something like that, become a painter or something. But I have people, adult, that they went through grief, and they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. So let's get a cabinet or a spare bathroom and paint different colors. That's all they do. And they're like, this is actually fun and amusing. We never thought about doing this. But I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your precious, amazing tips. Thank you so much for your time. And I so appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for our audience who are listening to this, thank you for joining us today. Please share your a couple tips and tools that you gain from here in the comment below, so we can continue learning from each other. And please share these conversations with your friends and family, anyone whom you know might be working with children, because as you see, it's such wonderful, precious tips, and adults deserve to be happy and thrive, and so are children, and these children will all grown up into adults. So please share these conversations as well, and I thank you very much for joining us. This is Dr. BirgitteTan, your grief specialist for individual and businesses, founder of the International Childhood Cancer Charity, and United States President for G100 Global Networking All Ladies League. I thank you very much, my friend, and I look forward to see you again very, very